At her lavish Miami birthday bash, Elena humiliates her disabled husband, Javier, in front of the city's elite, dancing with her lover instead. But Javier's next move, a brilliant legal trap, will leave her shattered and penniless. Can betrayal ignite a comeback? Share your stories of betrayal in the comments. Javier Morales stood at the edge of the crowded Coconut Grove mansion, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. The Miami night hummed with energy. 300 guests, the city's elite, mingled under the stars, their laughter blending with the pulse of a 12-piece orchestra. Tonight was Elena's 35th birthday, a $100,000 celebration Javier had meticulously planned to honor his wife of 12 years. 4 years ago, a construction accident stole his left leg, leaving him with a prosthetic that clicked faintly with each step. But his love for Elena, the woman who once lit up his world, hadn't wavered. Tonight, he aimed to remind her of that spark. The party buzzed with anticipation. Javier, 42, a real estate mogul who'd built a $250 million empire, had spared no expense. A custom diamond necklace, crafted by a Coral Gables jeweler, waited in his pocket. A surprise for Elena during their traditional dance, a moment Miami's high society cherished as the epitome of romance. He'd seen her grow distant since his accident, her warmth replaced by subtle sighs when his prosthetic clicked on their hardwood floors. But Javier believed in second chances. Tonight, he'd show her he was still the man she'd married. He navigated the crowd, his gait steady despite the faint mechanical sound of his leg. Guests parted, offering smiles and nods. "Javier, you've outdone yourself," said Claudia Reyes, wife of Miami's mayor, raising her champagne flute. Her words carried genuine warmth, a reminder of the respect he'd earned. Javier nodded, his focus fixed on Elena, who stood near a cascading champagne fountain, surrounded by admirers. Her presence commanded attention, her laughter sharp and bright, cutting through the music. For a moment, he let himself believe she was happy. The orchestra's conductor caught his eye, signaling the moment for the couple's dance. Javier's chest tightened with anticipation. This was it, the chance to pull Elena back from the emotional distance that had grown between them. He adjusted his cufflinks, a habit that steadied his nerves, and began his approach. Each step echoed faintly. Click, step, a rhythm as familiar as his own pulse. The crowd quieted, sensing the shift. All eyes turned to the center of the lawn, where the dance floor gleamed under string lights. Elena turned as he approached, her posture stiffening. Javier extended his hand, his voice soft but clear. "My love, our dance." The words carried the weight of 12 years. Memories of late-night talks, shared dreams, and the vows they'd made under a Miami sunset. He waited, his hand steady, expecting her to take it, to step into the moment with him. Her lips parted, and a sharp breath crackled through the microphone clipped to her dress, forgotten from her earlier speech. "I'm not dancing with a cripple tonight," she said, her voice slicing through the silence. The words hit like a physical blow, stealing Javier's breath. The crowd froze, champagne flutes hovering midair. Elena stepped back, her heels sharp against the stone, and turned to Diego Vargas, her personal trainer. His smug grin flashed as he stepped forward, all confidence and muscle, his presence a stark contrast to Javier's measured calm. "Diego will dance with me," Elena announced, her amplified voice carrying a cruel edge. "He can keep up." Nervous laughter rippled through the guests. Some averted their eyes. Others, like Elena's friend Sofia Lopez, hid smirks behind gloved hands. The orchestra stumbled into a waltz, notes halting and unsure. Diego pulled Elena close, too close, his hands on her waist as they swayed. Her head tilted back, her laughter ringing out, sharp and careless, as if Javier no longer existed. Javier stood rooted to the dance floor, the weight of 300 stairs pressing into him. His chest burned, not with weakness but with a fury so raw it threatened to consume him. For years ago, he'd sat by Elena's hospital bed after her hysterectomy, holding her hand through her tears, promising she'd never be less in his eyes. He'd rebuilt his life after the accident, learning to walk again, refusing to let his loss define him. But now, as Elena danced with another man, her betrayal cut deeper than any scaffold collapse. He didn't scream or collapse. Instead, Javier's lips curved into a smile, not broken, but cold, precise, the smile of a man who'd just found clarity. He adjusted his cufflinks once more, the gesture deliberate, and turned toward the exit. Each click of his prosthetic against the stone sounded different now, not defeat, but purpose. "Enjoy the party, my love," he called back, his voice warm enough to fool anyone not listening closely. The crowd parted as he left, the mansion's gates closing behind him with a soft clang. In his Bentley, speeding through Miami's neon-lit streets, Javier's mind was razor-sharp. He dialed Mateo Cruz, his private investigator. Follow Elena. Get everything. Photos, timestamps, locations. Mateo's gravelly voice didn't hesitate. Already on it. Javier's next call was to Sofia Alvarez, his attorney. File for divorce. Tomorrow morning. Grounds, adultery. Sofia's silence spoke volumes. She'd seen Javier navigate billion-dollar deals, but this was different. You're sure? She asked. Never been surer, he replied, his voice ice. As palm trees blurred past, memories flooded in. 12 years ago, he and Elena had been unstoppable, a power couple whose wedding graced Miami magazines. He'd stood by her through her infertility diagnosis, her surgeries, her fears of losing her worth. You're my world, he'd told her, meaning every word. But his accident had changed her. His prosthetic became a reminder of her shame, her visits to rehab perfunctory, her eyes always elsewhere. Now, Diego's shadow loomed, a man with no wealth but 2 legs and a hunger for Elena's status. Javier's hands tightened on the wheel. He'd given her loyalty when life broke her. She'd given him humiliation when it broke him. Tonight, the scales would begin to tip. He pulled into his mansion's driveway, the house dark against the bay. Inside, he called his banker. Freeze every account Elena has access to. Effective midnight. Then, to his housekeeper, Anna. Pack Elena's things, every bag, every shoe. Leave them by the gate. Anna's voice wavered. Tonight, sir? Tonight, he said, finality in his tone. As he stood in his study, the city's lights glittering beyond the glass, Javier's phone buzzed. Mateo's first photos arrived. Elena and Diego slipping into the South Beach W Hotel, her hand on his chest, their laughter reckless. Javier's jaw clenched, but his resolve hardened. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Javier Morales sat in the dim glow of his Coconut Grove study, the Miami skyline a silent witness beyond the glass. The clock read 1:17 a.m. But sleep was a distant thought. His phone vibrated with another update from Mateo Cruz, his private investigator. The latest photos showed Elena and Diego Vargas in a South Beach hotel elevator, her fingers tracing his jaw, their bodies pressed too close for plausible deniability. Javier's pulse quickened, not with pain, but with purpose. Each image was a piece of the legal arsenal he was building, a weapon to dismantle the life Elena thought she owned. He leaned back in his chair, replaying the night's events. Her voice, sharp and amplified, dismissing him as a cripple before 300 of Miami's elite still echoed in his mind. The sting of her betrayal had crystallized into resolve. For years ago, after his accident, Javier had rebuilt himself, physically, mentally, financially, while Elena's affection eroded, replaced by disdain for his prosthetic's faint click. Tonight's public rejection wasn't a surprise, but its brazenness lit a fire he couldn't ignore. His phone rang, snapping him back. Mateo, talk to me, Javier said, his voice steady. They're in the penthouse suite at the W, Mateo reported, his tone clipped. Booked under her name. I've got eyes on the hallway, cameras rolling. You want audio? Javier considered it, then shook his head, though Mateo couldn't see. No, visuals are enough. Keep tracking them. He hung up, his mind already racing to the next move. Evidence of adultery would gut Elena's case in court, but Javier needed more than moral victory. He needed to protect everything he'd built. He dialed Sofia Alvarez, his attorney, who answered despite the hour. Javier, I've started drafting the divorce petition, she said, her voice sharp with focus. Adultery grounds, as requested. But we need to talk assets. Javier's lips twitched into a grim smile. That's the beauty of it, Sofia. There are no marital assets. Silence followed, then her low whistle. The trust. You moved everything before the marriage. Exactly, he said. The mansion, the investments, the business. All in the Morales family trust, established 5 years before we said I do. She gets nothing. Sofia's voice held a rare note of awe. You're a step ahead. Always. The trust was Javier's masterstroke, a decision made on his father's advice a decade ago when his real estate empire began to soar. Protect your future, his father had urged, and Javier, then 30 and newly engaged, had complied, transferring his $250 million fortune into a fortress Elena couldn't breach. At the time, it felt like overcaution. Now, it was salvation. The mansion, the yacht, the investment accounts. all untouchable, locked behind legal walls she'd never suspected. Javier's next call was to his account manager, Luis. Confirm the freeze on Elena's accounts, he instructed. Every credit card, every line of credit. Done. Luis hesitated. She'll notice by morning, Javier. You sure about this? I'm sure, he replied, his tone final. The cards Elena used to fuel her lavish lifestyle, $20,000 monthly shopping sprees, dinners at Miami's hottest spots, were now dead. He'd activated the freeze weeks ago, a contingency he'd hoped never to use. But hope had died on that dance floor. He stood, his prosthetic clicking faintly as he paced to the window. Memories surged, unbidden but sharp. 8 years ago, Elena had faced her own crisis, a hysterectomy that left her sobbing in his arms, convinced she'd lose him. You'll want someone whole, she'd whispered. Javier had knelt beside her, promising she was enough, that their love didn't need children to endure. He'd stayed through every doctor's visit, every recovery milestone, never letting her feel less. But when his turn came, when steel scaffolding crushed his leg, leaving him to relearn walking, Elena's visits to rehab dwindled. Her eyes, once warm, turned cold, her patience thinning with each step he took. Now, as he stared at the bay's dark waters, Javier's phone buzzed again. A video from Mateo, Elena and Diego stumbling into the hotel suite, her laughter reckless, his hands bold. Javier's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice. He texted his housekeeper, Anna, with final instructions. Finish packing Elena's belongings. Every purse, every heel. By the gate now? Anna's reply was swift. It's done, sir. Suitcases are ready. The first rays of dawn crept over Miami as Javier prepared for the day. He showered, shaved, and chose a charcoal suit, its crisp lines a silent declaration of control. His phone lit up with social media alerts. Clips of Elena's dance with Diego were already circulating, captioned with glee by Miami's gossip vultures. Socialite ditches husband for trainer, one post screamed. Javier ignored them, focusing on the endgame. He drove to his downtown office, where Sofia waited with a stack of documents. Petition's ready, she said, sliding the papers across his desk. We file at 9 a.m. Adultery, emotional distress, and a request for no alimony. The trust makes her claims irrelevant, but the hotel footage will bury her. Javier nodded, signing where indicated. And the press. Sofia's eyes gleamed. They'll eat this up. Miami loves a scandal, and you're the wronged hero. Javier didn't care about the headlines, only the outcome. As he left the office, his phone buzzed with a text from Elena, staying out late. Don't wait up. The message, sent hours ago, was a final nail. He didn't reply. Instead, he drove back to the mansion, where Anna had lined up Elena's suitcases by the gate. Dozens of them, stuffed with the designer life she'd clung to. The locks on the mansion had been changed at 3 a.m., another move he'd planned weeks ago. Elena would return to find her world upended, her key useless, her status erased. Javier stood by the gate, the morning sun glinting off the water. He thought of the necklace still in his pocket, meant for a woman who no longer existed. He'd loved Elena fiercely, but love didn't survive betrayal. As he waited for her to discover the wreckage of her choices, his mind was clear. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about reclaiming his life. Elena Morales woke to the hum of South Beach, sunlight filtering through the W Hotel's penthouse suite. Diego Vargas slept beside her, one arm slung across the sheets, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in her mind. Last night's triumph, rejecting Javier in front of Miami's elite, dancing with Diego as cameras flashed, still pulsed in her veins. She'd felt untouchable, free from the weight of a husband whose prosthetic clicks had become a daily reminder of her trapped life. At 35, she believed she deserved more than a man broken by an accident. She slipped from the bed, her bare feet silent on the cool floor, and checked her phone. Notifications flooded the screen, videos of her waltz with Diego, her sharp words to Javier amplified by the forgotten microphone, now viral on Miami's social media. Elena Morales dumps disabled husband, screamed one headline. She smirked, unbothered. Public opinion never scared her. She thrived on attention, and this scandal would only elevate her status. Diego stirred, mumbling her name, and she ignored him, already planning her next move. Paris, perhaps, or a yacht in the Mediterranean, funded by Javier's fortune. At the hotel's marble-fronted desk, reality cracked her confidence. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morales, the clerk said, his voice tight as he swiped her platinum card for the fourth time. It's declined. Elena's stomach dropped. She thrust her Visa Black at him, then her MasterCard, her hands trembling as each attempt failed. There's a mistake, she snapped, her voice rising. Guests in the lobby turned, their whispers sharp as knives. Diego shifted behind her, his earlier swagger fading, his silence louder than the clerk's apologies. Desperate, Elena pulled a sapphire bracelet, Javier's gift from their 10th anniversary, from her wrist. Sell this, she demanded. A nearby guest offered $5,000, half its value, and Elena took it, her cheeks burning as phone cameras captured the transaction. The drive to Coconut Grove was a blur, Diego staring out the passenger window, his jaw tight. Elena's phone buzzed relentlessly, more posts, more memes, her humiliation now a citywide spectacle. She pulled into the mansion's driveway, expecting refuge, but froze at the sight of suitcases lining the iron gate like sentinels. Dozens of them, stuffed with her entire wardrobe, stood abandoned in the morning sun. Her key fumbled in the lock, turning uselessly. The door didn't budge. What the hell? Diego muttered, stepping back as if the house itself might reject him next. Footsteps echoed from inside, and Javier appeared, his posture calm, his charcoal suit pristine despite the early hour. In his hand was a manila envelope, its weight heavy with intent. Looking for something? He asked, his tone light, but laced with steel. Elena's pulse raced. This is my home, Javier. You can't lock me out. He extended the envelope. Page 3. The deeds in the Morales family trust. Sole ownership. You have no claim. Her fingers tore at the papers, eyes scanning legal jargon that confirmed his words. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, all untouchable, locked away before their marriage. A second document hit harder, a divorce petition citing adultery. You're making a mistake, Elena whispered, her voice cracking. Javier's gaze was unyielding, a stranger's coldness replacing the warmth she'd once known. The mistake was yours, he said, stepping back. The door closed with a soft click, leaving her among her packed belongings, a refugee in her own driveway. Diego shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the suitcases. I'll call you later, he mumbled, already retreating to his car, his interest evaporating with her wealth. Elena stood frozen, the envelope trembling in her hands. Her mind replayed the past, not with nostalgia, but with brutal clarity. 12 years ago, Javier had been her rock, standing by her through surgeries that stole her chance at motherhood. He'd held her, promised she was enough, rebuilt her confidence when she felt broken. But his accident 4 years ago, when a construction site collapse took his leg, changed everything. She'd visited him in rehab at first, but each click of his prosthetic grated, a reminder of a life she hadn't signed up for. She'd stayed for the status, the mansion, the endless credit lines, not for love. Now, those anchors were gone. Her phone buzzed again, Mateo's photos, forwarded anonymously. Elena and Diego in the hotel elevator, her hand on his chest, their kiss unmistakable. Her breath caught, realizing Javier had known, had planned for this. She sank to the gravel, the suitcases looming like tombstones of her former life. Social media notifications piled up, Miami socialites fall from grace. The city she'd ruled was now laughing at her. Across town, Javier sat in his downtown office, Sofia Alvarez across from him. The petition's filed, she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. Hotel footage is with the court. Adultery's airtight. Javier nodded, his focus unshaken. And the trust? Sofia's smile was sharp. Bulletproof. She'll get nothing but a joint account with $12,000. Frozen as of midnight. Javier leaned back, the weight of his plans settling. He'd spent years building an empire, protecting it with foresight he hadn't known he'd need. Now, that foresight was his weapon. As Elena sat among her suitcases, Javier drove to the courthouse, the Miami sun blazing overhead. The necklace he'd meant to give her last night sat heavy in his pocket, a symbol of a love he'd buried. The city buzzed with the scandal, but Javier didn't care about the noise. He cared about the silence to come, when Elena faced the consequences of her choices, and he reclaimed his future. Elena Morales sat in the back seat of an Uber, the Miami skyline shrinking behind her as the driver navigated toward a cramped downtown apartment she'd rented in haste. The suitcases piled by the Coconut Grove mansion's gate, her entire designer wardrobe, her jewelry, her former life, were being hauled away by a storage company, paid for with the last of her cash from selling the sapphire bracelet. Her phone, once a gateway to Miami's elite circles, now buzzed with mocking notifications. Viral clips of her card declines at the W Hotel, photos of her fumbling with a useless key at the mansion. The city she'd once ruled was turning her into a punchline. Diego Vargas hadn't called. His retreat from the driveway, his muttered promise to talk later, had been a lie she saw through too late. At 35, Elena had banked on her charm, her status, and Javier's wealth to carry her into a new chapter. Now, with her credit lines dead and her social capital evaporating, she faced a reality she hadn't known since her early modeling days: vulnerability. She scrolled through her contacts, dialing her friend Sofia Lopez, who'd smirked at Javier's humiliation. The call went to voicemail. 3 more friends, same result. Miami's elite had already closed ranks, leaving her on the outside. At the apartment, a 600-square-foot box with peeling paint, Elena dropped her purse on the floor and opened the divorce petition Javier had handed her. The words blurred: adultery, no alimony, trust ownership. But the truth was clear. Javier's fortune, the $250 million empire she'd lived off, was locked in a trust she couldn't touch. A joint account with $12,000 was her only lifeline, and even that was frozen. She called her lawyer, Carmen Rivera, a rising star in Miami's divorce courts known for winning big for wronged wives. "Carmen, he's trying to leave me with nothing," Elena said, her voice tight. "We fight this. Emotional distress, abandonment, something." Carmen's response was cautious. "Send me the documents. I'll review them tonight." But her tone lacked the fire Elena needed. Hours later, Carmen called back. "The trust is airtight, Elena. Established 5 years before your marriage, it's not marital property. The mansion, the yacht, the investments, all untouchable. The adultery evidence doesn't help. Hotel footage, time-stamped, showing you with Diego." Elena's breath caught. "What about my suffering?" "He changed after the accident, became distant." Carmen sighed. "That's a hard sell when you humiliated him publicly. We'll try, but don't expect miracles." Across town, Javier Morales stood on the balcony of his downtown office, the Miami River glinting below. He'd spent the morning with Sofia Alvarez, his attorney, finalizing the divorce strategy. The hotel footage from Mateo Cruz, Elena and Diego's reckless night, had been filed with the court, each frame a nail in her case. Sofia leaned against the railing beside him. "The press is circling," she said, scrolling through her tablet. "They want your side. The wronged husband angle is gold." Javier shook his head. "No interviews. Let the court speak." He wasn't after sympathy. He wanted precision, finality. His phone buzzed with a text from Mateo. "Elena's at a downtown apartment. Diego's gone radio silent. She's calling lawyers." Javier nodded to himself. He'd anticipated her scramble, her attempt to claw back what she'd lost. But the trust, his father's advice a decade ago, was his shield. Every asset, $200 million in real estate, $50 million in investments, was safe. He'd built his empire with sweat and foresight, and Elena's betrayal wouldn't touch it. He thought back to her hysterectomy, how he'd stayed by her side, promising a future together. Her rejection after his accident, her choice of Diego over him, had rewritten that promise. Elena spent the day pacing her apartment, the walls closing in. She called Diego again, no answer. A Google search revealed his Instagram, already flaunting a new gym client, a younger woman with a trust fund smile. Elena's stomach twisted. She'd traded Javier's loyalty for a man who saw her as a stepping stone, now useless without her wealth. Social media was merciless, from mansions to motels. Elena's fall read one blog post, complete with a photo of her suitcases by the gate. She slammed her phone down, her hands shaking. Carmen arrived that evening, her briefcase heavy with notes. "We can argue for a share of the joint account," she said, spreading papers on the coffee table. "But $12,000 won't last. The adultery evidence kills alimony chances. Your best shot is a settlement, but Javier's team is ruthless." Elena's voice was low. "He planned this, didn't he?" Carmen nodded. "The trust, the account freeze, the footage, he was ready. You need to prepare for the worst." Javier, meanwhile, drove to a quiet cafe in Wynwood, meeting Anna, his housekeeper, who'd packed Elena's belongings. "You did well," he said, sliding an envelope across the table, a bonus for her loyalty. Anna hesitated. "She looked lost, sir, standing by those suitcases." Javier's jaw tightened. "She chose this." He left the cafe, his prosthetic clicking with purpose. The city's pulse felt different now, not a backdrop to his pain, but a stage for his rebirth. Elena lay awake that night, the apartment's thin walls amplifying the city's noise. She thought of her modeling days, The hustle before Javier's wealth gave her ease. At 35, that world was gone. Her face, once her currency, now carried lines no filter could erase. The divorce petition loomed like a guillotine. She'd walked away from a man who'd loved her through her darkest days, betting on a future that didn't exist. Now, with Miami turning its back, she faced a truth she couldn't outrun. Her empire was dust. The Miami-Dade County Courthouse buzzed with anticipation, its marble halls packed with reporters and onlookers drawn by the scandal that had gripped the city. Elena Morales entered courtroom 3B, her steps measured, her last designer suit a defiant remnant of her past life. At 35, she carried the weight of her choices, humiliating her husband, Javier, at her birthday gala, choosing Diego Vargas over their marriage, only to find her world dismantled by Javier's calculated response. Today, 6 weeks after that fateful night, the divorce hearing would decide her fate. Elena sat beside Carmen Rivera, her attorney, whose sharp reputation had promised a fighting chance. Carmen's plan was bold: argue emotional distress, paint Javier as a controlling husband whose disability soured their marriage, and demand half his $250 million fortune. Elena's hands clenched in her lap, her confidence fragile. Social media had turned her into a villain. Clips of her hotel checkout fiasco and suitcases by the mansion gate looped endlessly online. Diego had vanished, chasing new prospects, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. Across the aisle, Javier Morales sat with Sofia Alvarez, his attorney, his posture calm, his charcoal suit a quiet statement of control. His prosthetic leg, hidden beneath the table, no longer felt like a weakness but a badge of resilience. At 42, he'd rebuilt his life after a construction accident, only to endure Elena's betrayal. The trust he'd established a decade ago, securing his real estate empire, investments, and mansion, had been his lifeline. Today, it would be his sword. Judge Carla Mendoza entered, her reputation for fairness preceding her. 30 years on the bench had honed her ability to cut through theatrics to the law's core. Carmen rose first, her voice steady as she painted Elena as a devoted wife trapped by Javier's post-accident withdrawal. My client endured years of emotional neglect, Carmen argued, gesturing to Elena, who dabbed her eyes for effect. Her actions at the gala were a cry for freedom from a marriage that no longer served her. She deserves equitable division of their assets. Judge Mendoza's gaze was unreadable, her pen tapping lightly. Present your asset documentation, she said. Carmen slid a folder across, detailing Javier's wealth, $200 million in properties, $50 million in investments. Sofia Alvarez stood, her briefcase heavy with counter-evidence. Your Honor, the assets in question are held by the Morales Family Trust, established 5 years before the marriage. They are not marital property. She handed over meticulously dated deeds and agreements, each page a brick in an unbreachable wall. Carmen's confidence wavered as she scanned the documents. Objection, she said, her voice tight. The trust's timing shouldn't exclude my client from fair compensation. Judge Mendoza's eyes narrowed. The trust predates the marriage by 5 years, Ms. Rivera. It's legally protected. Objection overruled. Elena's breath hitched, her fingers digging into her palms. The joint account, $12,000, now frozen, was her only claim, and even that was slipping away. Sofia's next move was surgical. We present evidence of adultery, she said, sliding a tablet to the judge. Time-stamped hotel footage played silently. Elena and Diego in the W Hotel elevator, their intimacy undeniable. This violates any moral claim to alimony, Sofia added. Carmen's face paled, her argument unraveling. She stammered, this doesn't negate my client's emotional suffering. But Judge Mendoza's expression shut her down. The law prioritizes evidence, not sentiment. The gavel fell like a hammer. Divorce granted to the plaintiff, Javier Morales. No alimony, no asset division. Case dismissed. The courtroom exhaled, reporters scrambling to capture the moment. Elena remained frozen, the ruling echoing in her mind. Her empire, built on Javier's wealth, her socialite status, was gone. Carmen packed her briefcase, her voice low. I'm sorry, Elena. The trust was ironclad. I've never seen a case this tight. Elena's whisper was barely audible. What now? Carmen's reply was blunt. You start over. Javier shook Sofia's hand, his expression composed but his eyes alive with quiet triumph. Reporters swarmed him outside, cameras flashing, but he waved them off. No comment, he said, his voice steady. He climbed into his Bentley, the city's pulse a backdrop to his next chapter. At his office, he met with a local nonprofit, pledging $1 million to fund entrepreneurship programs for disabled individuals. The accident that took his leg had taught him resilience. Elena's betrayal had taught him boundaries. He was ready to build again. Elena stumbled down the courthouse steps, phone cameras tracking her every move. The suit she wore, once a symbol of power, now felt like a costume. At 35, her modeling career was a distant memory, her social circle closed, her resources drained. She rented a bus ticket to a small apartment in Orlando, far from Miami's glare. The city's elite had moved on, her name now a cautionary tale. She sat alone that night, the divorce papers on the table, her future a blank slate she hadn't prepared for. Javier stood on his mansion's balcony, the Miami River shimmering below. The necklace he'd meant for Elena, meant for a love that no longer existed, sat in a drawer, a relic of a life he'd left behind. He thought of her hysterectomy, how he'd promised to stand by her, and how she'd walked away when his own loss came. Justice had been served, not through rage, but through strategy. He turned back to his desk, a new project waiting, a life rebuilt on his terms. Miami's social media churned with the verdict. Javier Morales wins divorce battle. Comments flooded in, some praising his restraint, others debating if he'd been too harsh. The city moved on, but the story lingered, a reminder that loyalty could endure trials, but betrayal carried a cost. Javier's gaze settled on the horizon, his heart steady. Elena's fall was her own, his rise was his.